They gave me the damn plaque with one hand, then handed me my termination papers with the other. I smiled for the crowd, lights in my eyes, cameras clicking like it was some Hollywood farewell. But inside, I was already done. The applause was too loud, too forced. I could feel it vibrating in my bones, hollow as hell. 3 weeks earlier, I'd been standing outside the boardroom on the 20th floor, just trying to be early. That was always my thing. Be early, be prepared, don't give them an excuse. But that day, I wish I'd been late. The door was cracked, just a sliver, enough to let voices slip through. I wasn't eavesdropping, I just froze when I heard my name. He deserves the award, Malcolm said. Our COO, the guy with the $60 haircut and the permanent smirk. Let him take it, then we move forward, cleanly. Karen laughed. Not a belly laugh, hers never were. It was that tight, clipped kind of laugh people do when they're pretending something's clever. He's not going to see it coming, she said. I'll finalize the succession plan by Friday. I stepped back like I'd been hit. For a second, I thought maybe they were talking about someone else. But I knew better. Karen. God, I helped her. Coached her through her first year. Walked her through client calls. Showed her how to play the game without losing herself. And Malcolm? He used to call me his closer. I'd saved more than one of his deals from imploding. I was the guy they called when things were on fire. And now, I was just a problem to be moved on from. I should have walked then. I should have left the award on the table and let the door hit me on the way out. But the game wasn't over, not even close. 3 weeks later, I stood there under the fake gold lights, holding the plaque like it meant something. For exemplary leadership and innovation, it read. They shook my hand like we were old friends. Karen even kissed me on the cheek. A photographer snapped the moment, her eyes half-lidded, my smile dead behind the teeth. The whole company clapped. People who owed me their promotions, their jobs. Not a single one of them looked me in the eye. I'd been told the ceremony would be quick. Just a token of appreciation, Malcolm had said. He even chuckled like he was doing me a favor. Afterwards, I walked back to my office, if it was still mine. I knew what was waiting for me. There it was. A plain envelope on the desk. My name in bold on the front. I didn't even sit down. Just opened it, scanned the lines. Restructuring. New strategic direction. Thank you for your contributions. That was it. 2 decades boiled down to 5 paragraphs and a fake gold plaque. I went home that night with my tie still on. My wife asked how it went. I lied, said the award was nice, said I was tired, but inside, something was already moving. I wasn't done, because the very next morning, the deal that should have saved my job, it sealed their coffin instead. The next morning, my phone rang before I'd even finished my coffee. I almost didn't answer. Thought it might be someone from HR, or worse, Karen pretending to care. But it wasn't. Luke, the voice said, it's Denise, from Elron. I sat up straighter. Denise Sato, CIO of Elron Energy. She didn't call unless it mattered. I just got off a review call with procurement, she said. We're moving forward. Boards approved the full scope. My stomach tightened. And we're only signing, she added, if you lead it, personally. That line hit me like a jolt of electricity. My name. In the contract. Not Elixis. Not the executive team. Me. Denise didn't wait for a reaction. I've already flagged legal. They'll be sending your team the red lines by noon. But I need to know now. Are you in? I looked at the award plaque still sitting in my trash bin. I'm in, I said. Good. You earned this. And to be clear, if they try to sideline you, the whole thing goes off the table. Understood? Crystal clear. We hung up, and just like that, the biggest deal in Elixis history, $850 million over 5 years, was tied to me. Not the company, not Malcolm, not Karen. Me. By the time I got to the office, I could feel the tension already. Someone must have seen the calendar invite. Contract debrief. Elron, immediate action required. The entire C-suite was in Malcolm's office with the blinds drawn. I walked in like I belonged there, because I did. Karen opened the door, surprised to see me. Oh, Luke, we weren't expecting. You should have been, I said, stepping inside. Malcolm looked up, hands folded, fake smile loaded and ready. Luke, Congratulations, we just got word. Impressive turnaround. I nodded once. You didn't get word. You got instructions? Denise called me directly. That wiped the grin right off his face. I'm leading the contract, I said, pulling out the paperwork and sliding it across the table. My name is embedded in the deliverables. Clause 4.1, project continuity is dependent on individual assignment. Karen paled. Let's go over what I need, I continued. Full technical oversight. Internal dev autonomy. Budget locked from the CTO's office, not finance. And Denise wants bi-weekly client checkpoints, with me at the table. No filters. Malcolm cleared his throat. That's unusual. Our internal protocol. Then adjust your protocol. Silence. He glanced at Karen. She gave a tight nod like she'd swallowed something bitter. Of course, she said. We'll support the arrangement. But I could see it, the flicker of panic. They weren't prepared for this. I was supposed to be a memory by now, someone they could toast, thank, then ghost. Instead, I'd just become indispensable. Funny thing, though, saving the company didn't make me safe. It made me dangerous. Suddenly, no one would meet my eyes in the hallway, my calendar filled with optional meetings I wasn't invited to. Slack messages stopped mid-thread when I entered the channel. I had stepped back into the room, but they were already planning how to shove me back out. And they didn't realize I'd already started planning too. The Monday after Elron signed the deal, you could feel the buzz humming through the office walls. Slack was lit up, emails flew faster than usual, and even the engineers downstairs were grinning for the first time in a year. It was like someone plugged the building back into a socket, and at the center of it all was Elron's team, and me. We were in sync. Their architects weren't just sharp, they were hungry. They asked the right questions, challenged my assumptions, and moved fast without ego. In 2 weeks, we broke apart the infrastructure spec and rewrote it into something that didn't just meet Elron's needs, but would have set a new bar for the entire industry. Back at HQ, for a minute, it felt like I mattered again. People nodded when I walked past. I caught a few smiles from devs who'd barely looked up from their keyboards before. I started to think, maybe this could work. Maybe I'd fought my way back in. Then the reschedules started. First, it was my Wednesday morning check-in with Malcolm. Last-minute CFO prep, his assistant said. Can we move it to next week? Next week never came. Then the Friday sync Karen set up with product leadership quietly vanished from my calendar. No email, no explanation, just gone. When I asked, she smiled like it was nothing. Oh, we just looped that into Tuesday's strategy session. Except I wasn't invited to that session either. I noticed she'd stopped copying me on platform roadmap threads too, which was funny considering the roadmap was now my contract. She'd CC the junior PMs, even finance. But somehow, I was always left off. And Malcolm? He suddenly had travel conflicts every time we had sprint review. But his assistant always asked for the deck afterwards, always said, he's really eager to see your progress. Sure he was. They weren't ignoring me by accident. They were repositioning, surgically, carefully, like clearing out a body before the autopsy report comes in. But I didn't panic. I'd been through this before, just never from this side of the table. This time, I didn't wait for confirmation. I prepared. I started documenting everything, every meeting I wasn't in, every thread I was dropped from. I mirrored Elron's comms onto a private archive. I flagged changes in Jira that didn't go through me. I watched as Karen assigned discovery workshops to people who had never even seen the original scope. They were planning to take it all, my project, my team, my win, and wipe me out of the frame. But here's what they didn't know. I'd already started moving, quietly, cleanly, just like they had. I didn't fight for my job. I fortified for my exit, because if they were going to erase me, I was going to make sure it hurt. It started with an old laptop. Black casing, scratched edges. No stickers, no serial tags, nothing that could trace it back to Elixis, just pure, untouched independence. It used to sit in the back of my closet, tucked behind winter coats and a busted Wi-Fi router. I hadn't powered it on in years, but when I did, it purred like it remembered me. That machine had been my warhorse back when I was freelancing, back when I built things for myself, before boardrooms and suits, before Karen, before Elixis. That night, I plugged it in and rewired my entire home network. Changed the IP routing, rerouted DNS through encrypted tunnels, air-gapped my workspace from anything corporate. No Slack, no Outlook, no single sign-on. I wanted isolation. I needed it. Then I got to work. I didn't copy Elixis's platform. I rebuilt it from scratch. The architecture was mine anyway. Had been for years. I'd designed the scaffolding for the back end back when we were still in beta, back when nobody cared about enterprise-grade anything. I'd patched it when their outsourced devs botched security. I'd restructured it when Malcolm bragged to investors about elastic scalability, without knowing what the hell that meant. All I did now was strip it down to its essence. Clean code, tight permissions, flexible microservices, scalable modules, no legacy junk, no backdoors. I called it Aegis, not a weapon, a shield. My shield. Every time I pushed a new build, I tested it under simulated stress loads, wrote my own versioning scripts, wrote my own licensing logic. The whole thing was self-contained, self-owned, and invisible. I buried it deep enough no one at Elixis could find it, even if they tried. Because while I was building Aegis, Karen had started snooping. She was subtle at first, accessing team Git branches she never touched before, pulling queries from analytics environments she didn't manage. But I saw her. I always saw her. So, I gave her something to look at, a prototype version of the Elron platform, a decoy. It looked functional. React front end, Node back end, mocked endpoints. It even ran internal demos, but under the surface, it was just an empty shell. And here's the fun part. Every time Karen clicked, every time she downloaded a report or triggered a build, Aegis logged it, every IP, every timestamp, every file access. She thought she was gathering ammo. She was actually writing her own audit trail. And I smiled through every meeting. Every time Karen said, "We're aligning strategy," I nodded. Every time Malcolm said, "We're transitioning scope," I took notes. Let them think I was fading out. They didn't know they were standing on landmines. They didn't know that the real engine, the heart of the Elron platform, was no longer theirs. It was mine, and it was alive. They called it a visioning session, which, in Elixis speak, meant polish theft with pastries. The invite came through the company-wide events alias, big conference room, all hands optional, but highly encouraged. Topic: strategic direction, platform future, and partner alignment. No mention of Elron, no mention of me. That was my first clue. The second came when I walked in and saw Malcolm standing by the glass board with a new blazer and the kind of self-satisfied posture that meant he was about to say something that sounded profound and meant absolutely nothing. Karen stood by the screen with a remote in hand, already queuing up the first slide. And me? I found a seat in the back corner, no name tag, no nod of acknowledgement. A few people glanced my way. None of them smiled. I watched. Malcolm started with a long speech about collaborative alignment, transversal synergies, and cross-functional convergence, none of which meant jack. He name-dropped Elron exactly once and never mentioned the contract or the person leading it. That person was me. Karen took over with a slide deck full of stock images and sanitized flowcharts. She walked through new platform architecture, completely rebranded, stripped of anything tied to my work. She referenced team contributions, thanked the operations group, nodded to finance. At one point, she said I had a strong tactical grip on implementation. That's how she described building the entire goddamn engine of our future. Tactical grip. When I finally raised my hand to speak, Karen glanced at Malcolm. He stepped forward, cut me off mid-sentence. "Thanks, Luke. I think we've got it from here." And then he handed the mic to a finance guy, a junior one, someone who had once emailed me asking what a containerized service was. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about strategy. This wasn't about direction. This was about rewriting history without me in it. They weren't just removing me from the project. They were removing me from the narrative. I leaned back in my chair, didn't say another word, just watched as they tried to paint themselves as architects of something they didn't understand, and then something else hit me, harder. David wasn't there. My closest friend in the company, the guy who used to sit with me during every product review, wasn't anywhere in the room. No chair, no nameplate. His Slack had been quiet for a week. Last text I sent was still marked unread. That silence said everything. The quieter I stayed, the louder their intent got. They didn't want to lead with me. They wanted to lead without me. And David, the one person I thought might push back, he was already gone. I texted David the morning after the visioning session. Still grabbing coffee today, same spot, same time. No response. I told myself he was probably in meetings. We were all busy, especially with Elron heating up. But a few hours later, when my calendar pinged, I noticed something strange. Our usual block, every Thursday at 8:15, was gone, canceled, not even rescheduled. Just deleted. Still, I went. Same cafe down the block, same table in the corner. 2 lattes, mine black, his with oat milk and cinnamon. I ordered both like always. Stupid habit. I waited. 10 minutes passed, then 20, 40. The coffee cooled, the foam collapsed. At 43 minutes, I got a text. Hey, I can't make it. I can't be seen taking sides. Hope you understand. That was it. No apology, no rain check, just polite abandonment. I stared at the screen for a long time before I put the phone down. I should have seen it coming. David was the first person I met when I joined Elixis. We'd built the original dev stack side by side, spent late nights eating vending machine Pop-Tarts while debugging API loops. I helped him negotiate his first retention bonus. He covered for me when I was in the hospital with a kidney stone. And now I was radioactive. He didn't even lie to soften the blow. Just can't be seen. That afternoon, I passed him in the hallway. He was walking with a group from product, laughing, talking about some happy hour Karen was organizing. He saw me. I saw him. We nodded. That was it. No words, no pause. Just 2 guys pretending nothing ever mattered. And somehow, that one silent nod hurt worse than the paperwork ever could. It confirmed what I already knew deep down. I was done at Elixis, not because they pushed me out, but because no one pulled me back in. All that time, I thought I was part of something, that I'd earned loyalty, respect, maybe even friendship. But in the end, I was just a strategic risk no one wanted to be near. And once your presence becomes a liability, people erase you before the system does. I still remember the night I drafted the Elron contract. It was late. Past midnight. I was at my kitchen table with 2 screens lit up and a legal pad filled with scratch notes and red ink. Legal had sent over a rough framework, something templated and generic. I could have signed off and sent it back like everyone expected, but I didn't. Old habits die hard. Back in my freelance days, I used to write my own scopes, build my own licensing clauses, even draft NDAs that could hold up in arbitration. I knew exactly where people skimmed, where eyes glazed over, where loopholes liked to hide, so I slipped in my own. Clause 18B, Ownership and Oversight. It tied the core licensing of the deliverables, meaning the actual IP, the guts of the platform, to a simple stipulation. My continued oversight. Remove me from the project or significantly alter my authority, and the entire license would nullify. Elron could walk. Cleanly. I didn't hide it. It wasn't a trick. It was there in plain text, toward the bottom of a 42-page appendix. Legal skimmed it. They always did. Malcolm signed off after a 5-minute read-through and a grumble about too much legalese. Karen didn't even glance past the highlight summary. But Denise, the CIO at Elron, sus, she caught it. A week after signing, she sent me a 1-line email. Just confirming we're aligned on 18B. Your leadership remains critical. I replied with 2 words, fully aligned. No one else ever brought it up. They assumed it was boilerplate. They didn't know they'd built their billion-dollar deal on top of a loaded gun. And now I sat in my office, watching the walls close in, knowing exactly where the safety was. They handed me a mic at the awards ceremony, called me a visionary, and the soul of the platform. I smiled for the crowd, my hand on the plaque, my other in my pocket, fingering the email chain with Denise. They thought they were burying me with confetti. What they didn't realize, I was standing over the detonator, and the speech they clapped for, it wasn't a thank you. It was a goodbye letter they'd helped write. The night before the ceremony, I didn't sleep. I sat at my desk, lights off, fingers hovering over the keyboard. The glow from the screen lit up the edges of the room, and for a second it felt like I was back in my 20s, launching something from nothing. Only this time, I wasn't building, I was ending. I opened the terminal window on my old laptop, the one with Aegis installed deep under layers of encryption, unreachable from the corporate net. Typed the script name like a prayer, Aegis FYLNC Deutsch. Then I pressed enter, no fanfare, no explosions. Just a single blinking line confirming what I already knew. It was done. On the surface, everything would look fine. The Elixis platform would still boot, dashboards would load, login portals would function. But behind it all, the real logic, the infrastructure Elron was paying for, was gone. I hadn't sabotaged anything. I just took back what was mine. I left behind a functioning shell. But the moment anyone tried to dig deeper, copy it, or scale it, Aegis would know and respond. At 10:07 a.m. the next morning, exactly 15 minutes after the award ceremony began, someone triggered it. I was still in the conference hall, standing under the lights, holding that worthless plaque, when the alert hit my burner phone. They tried to clone the staging environment, typical Karen move. Probably wanted to build a parallel system, cut me out clean. The trigger fired, and Aegis did what I built it to do. It compiled a full audit, timestamps, unauthorized data pulls, internal chat excerpts, project tampering logs, and every tracked violation of the Elron contract, even voice notes from meetings they didn't know I'd recorded. Then it sent everything. 3 packages, one to the SEC compliance tip portal, one to Elron's legal counsel, and one to a journalist I trusted, a woman who owed me a favor from a story she'd once buried at my request. The subject line was simple: the truth about Elixis. By the time the ceremony ended, I was in the back of the room, sipping lukewarm coffee and waiting. At 1:20 p.m., it hit. Elron's board held an emergency call. Less than an hour later, they pulled the plug on the contract. $850 million gone, and with it, the lie Malcolm and Karen built their entire reputations on. By the end of the day, Elixis stock dropped 39% in 3 hours. They didn't just lose their system, they lost their credibility in real time, and I walked out of that building for the last time, calm, unnoticed, and free. It happened fast, faster than I thought it would. That first afternoon, word trickled out in fragments, something about Elron suspending operations, something about a compliance review. No one made eye contact in the elevators. Slack got quiet, really quiet. By the next morning, it was a flood. Someone leaked internal emails, full threads, screenshots, memos, meeting minutes. It was like watching a building collapse in slow motion while the sprinkler system sprayed confetti. The finance team's private channel got out, messages debating how to reclassify Elron's prepayments as R&D risk. Karen's name was in every third message. Then came the legal memos, then the logs, raw data with Karen's credentials accessing restricted branches, timestamps aligned perfectly with the Aegis audit. And then came the resignation, unsigned but written in Malcolm's tone, his voice, circulated to a small group at first, then leaked like everything else. He was trying to jump before the ship took on more water. Karen tried calling. I let it ring twice, then sent it to voicemail. "Luke," she said, her voice tight, like someone had her by the throat. "There are things you don't understand. There's more to this than—" I stopped listening, saved the message, labeled the note, "Things I Learned." Elron's public statement dropped later that day. Due to verified contractual and data integrity violations, all cooperation with Elixis ends immediately. 12 words. That was all it took to kill a legacy. And while the vultures circled Elixis, I flew clean. 3 days later, I woke up to a headline on Tech Circuit. NAVAX launches groundbreaking analytics suite, designed by Luke Carter. I read it twice, then I read it again. That was my name, my system, my terms. The Aegis platform, polished, refined, wrapped in NAVAX's reach and my control. I didn't leak anything. I didn't sabotage the company. I just showed the truth. And the truth? It burned their whole operation to the ground. They thought I'd fight to stay in their house. I built a better one next door.